Hi friends, warm wishes to one and all. So when we are talking about the case of your UPSC, Civil Services Preliminary and Mains Examination, the most or else one of the most important aspects of that particular examination is science and technology. So when we're talking about the case of your preliminary examination point of view, in the syllabus it is very much clearly mentioned the general science, at the same time, the applications of science and technology in the day-to-day life, the developments of science and technology in day-to-day life. Now, we're talking about the case of your general science. The moment we say general science in particular, so we need to discuss about the case of your physics, at the same time, the case of your chemistry, at the same time, the case of your biology. But when we are looking at the case of your the general science part in case of your civil services preliminary examinations from the past few years, almost around 6 to 7 years or around 8 to 9 years, the number of questions that are asked from physics part, you can say that it's almost less than five, or else you can even say it's almost even less than 2 or 3 questions. Right? At the same time, the questions that are asked from chemistry, right? The questions that are asked from chemistry, they are not from the case of your traditional chemistry. But the thing is that here, the questions are from chemistry. Somewhere or the other, they are related to the environmental science or else the case of your environmental studies. So the number of questions that are asked from physics and chemistry, you can say that almost zero. So, as with the case of your preliminary examination point of view, if it just any particular student, if it is just having a basic knowledge regarding what is what in science, then that will be enough for him to develop some answers, to write some answers, giving into the mains examination point of view. The moment you're talking about the case of your biology, right, we are getting some questions from biology, especially the case of your the microbiology part, right, or is the case of your the zoology part, right. From these particular sections we are getting some questions, the questions which are related to the different types of diseases, the questions that are related to the case of the different types of virus, at the same time bacteria, the diseases that are caused by viruses, the diseases that are caused by bacteria. We are having some questions which are based on this. So apart from these things, we don't have much thing to discuss or else to study in case of your general science. Yes, but the moment you talk about the case of your science and technology, the number of questions that are being appearing, the number of questions that are being asked from science and technology from the past few years has been constantly increasing. So here in case of your science and technology, what is the number of questions? On an average, we are expecting something around 12 to 14 questions from this particular part. And out of these particular 12 to 14 questions from the preliminary examination point of view, almost around 70 to 75% of the questions, they are completely based on the current issues. They are completely based on the recent developments in the field of science and technology. Right, the remaining 20 to 25% may be asked for the case of your the static part which is related to the case of your science and technology. So what are the topics that we need to focus in the field of science and technology? Any particular emerging field, any particular field which is developing, right, at a very higher rate, right, those particular topics or else those particular fields are very important for us. Now for example, you talk about the case of your biotechnology, the developments in the field of biotechnology, the developments in the field of IT, nothing but your information technology, or as a case of your nanotechnology, or as a case of your space technology, defense technology, energy technologies, energy sector. So we are talking about the case of your renewable energy resources, non-renewable energy resources. At the same time, the various developments that we are seeing in case of your renewable energy resources. So from the preliminary examination point of view, the developments in these particular sectors or else in these particular fields are very, very important. Right? Now for these particular things, in order to have a complete thorough knowledge, in these particular aspects or else in these particular topics, any particular student or each and every particular student need to have a complete idea regarding the developments in these particular fields, and that can be obtained only by going through the various newspapers or as a case of your articles. That is the reason why we are saying that here 70 to 75% of the questions are based on the contemporary issues. You can expect any particular question which is related to the field of technology, right, in case of your preliminary examination. The moment you're talking about the case of your biotechnology. So in case of your biotechnology, you talk about the case of your gene editing, right? This is one particular thing which you're talking about. At the same time, the case of your DNA fingerprinting, right? At the same time, you talk about the case of your 3D printing, right? Gene editing, or as a case of your DNA fingerprinting, or else you're talking about the case of your bioenergy crops. Now, what are these particular bioenergy crops? So, which particular crops can be declared, or else which particular crops are declared as a bioenergy crops? So, what is the advantage with these particular bioenergy crops? Now, this is one particular thing that we need to have an idea about this. At the same time, you're talking about the case of your MERS. So what is this particular MERS? Or else you're talking about the case of your SARS-CoV. Now, as of now, we all know that we are fighting with this particular SARS-CoV-2. So what is this particular MERS? What is this particular SARS-CoV-2? At the same time, in case of your SARS-CoV-2, we find the different variants in this particular case. At the same time, the subvariants of this particular things. Now, it is because of these particular variants or as because of these particular subvariants, we are facing huge amount of health crisis. Now, as a result of which we are importing the ventilators. You're talking about the case of oxygen concentrators. So, we need to have an idea about the functioning of these particular oxygen concentrators. At the same time, the different medicines, the different types of your vaccines. The moment you're talking about the case of your vaccines, here in case of your vaccines, we have all the different types of vaccines. You're talking about the case of your mRNA vaccines. You're talking about the case of your subunit protein conjugate vaccines. Right? So, you're talking about different types of vaccines here. So, all these particular vaccines are working in which particular way? We need to have an idea regarding the case of the different types of vaccines. At the same time, the moment you talk about the case of your biotechnology, you're talking about the case of your CRISPR technology. What is this particular CRISPR technology? At the same time, you're talking about the case of your genetically modified crops. What is genetically modification? At the same time, the moment you're talking about the case of your IT, now this is one particular sector or this is one particular topic wherein we are seeing huge amount of developments. Right? As of now, we are talking about the case of the rolling of 5G in India. 5G has been rolled in almost around 13 cities in India. So very soon we are going to have 5G across the nation. At the same time, already Telecom Regulatory Authority of India has sought proposals for the case of your 6G also. At the same time, in case of your information technology, as of now, we are talking about the case of the introduction of IPv6. So what is this particular IPv6? So what is the difference between Li-Fi and Wi-Fi? At the same time, we're talking about the case of your cybersecurity policy of 2017. So what is this particular cybersecurity policy? What is darknet? What is bitcoins? Now, these are all the things which are emerging as of now. You're talking about the case of your quantum processor. You're talking about the case of your quantum dots. But at the same time, you're talking about the case of your space technology. The moment you're talking about the case of your space technology, the very first thing that comes into picture, the very first thing that comes into mind is the case of your ISRO. So in case of your ISRO, we are able to see huge developments in case of your ISRO. the different types of launch vehicles that we are using here. So whether you are talking about the case of your SSLV, which is going to be launched very soon, or else the one that we are going to launch very soon, one more thing, that is the case of your reusable launch vehicles. At the same time, we have been using the case of your PSLV, GSLV. Now, at the same time, you talk about the case of your international space missions. So you talk about the case of your March 2020 program. What is the case of your Tianwei program, Tianwei 1? At the same time, the space station which is going to be built by the China, the space station which is going to be built by India in maybe probably by the year 2030. Right, at the same time, in case of your space technology, so very recently ISRO has announced that it is going to start its work on the green propellants. So what are these particular green propellants? The moment you're talking about the case of the different types of fuel in case of your rockets, you talk about solid fuel, you talk about liquid fuel, you talk about cryogenic fuel. But that particular liquid fuel is causing environmental pollution. So to reduce that particular thing, as of now, ISRO has announced that it is going to work on green propellants. Then you talk about the case of your defense technologies. So in case of your defense technologies, you talk about the latest developments in the field of your defense. You talk about the case of your hypersonic technology demonstrative vehicle. Right, at the same time, we talk about the case of your vertical launch short range surface to air missile. So what is this particular vertical launch short range surface to air missile? What is MARICH? Right? At the same time, we talk about the case of your advanced shaft technology. So what is this particular advanced shaft technology? At the same time, we talk about the case of your stealth technology. So all these particular things are the recent developments in the field of defense. At the same time, we talk about the case of your energy technologies. The changes that are taking place in the field of your energy sector. You talk about the case of your nuclear energy. You talk about the case of your renewable energy, non-renewable energy. In terms of your renewable energy, you're talking about the case of your green hydrogen. So what is the difference between green hydrogen, gray hydrogen and blue hydrogen? At the same time, the different projects, the different missions that have been started by the central government, at the same time by international organizations to reduce the carbon dioxide emissions, to reduce the methane emissions. You talk about the case of your zero emission vehicles, right? You talk about the case of your COP26 summit. All these particular things we need to discuss in case of your energy technologies. So whenever we are talking about the case of your science and technology, now this is one particular subject or this is one particular discipline which has to be right thoroughly developed, keeping in view the preliminary examination point of view as well as the case of your mains examination point of view. So my suggestion for the candidates is that whenever you are reading, whenever you are discussing about any particular topic in the field of science and technology, you need to have a complete idea regarding that particular subject, keeping in view the preliminary examination point of view as well as the case of your mains examination point. Right? Thank you guys.